Afternoon and good morning, everyone. Bangladesh is celebrating 50 years of independence today. And it's been last 50 years has been tremendous journey for Bangladesh. We have seen tremendous progress in the economy and how we come across as a nation to the whole world. Sitting in the inflection point, Bangladesh has set ambitious goals. So number one is to achieve the SDG goals by 2030, to graduate to a middle income country by 2025, and to become a developed nation by 2041. So for that, next 3 to 5 years is extremely critical for us as we are sitting in that inflection point. We have to tap into the opportunities that's been thrown to us, and we also have to address the challenges and navigate around that. So two aspects are very important here. One is inspiring the internal stakeholders so that we can rally the entire country around that, and also engage the global stakeholder to drive an economic and cultural narrative for Bangladesh. This is extremely, extremely important for the next 3 to 5 years. Talking about that, there are a lot of Bangladeshis living abroad, including the esteemed panel that we have with us for various reasons. Let it be quality of life, higher education, job, or business. This forms a massive 12 to 13 million Bangladeshi diaspora around the globe. And this includes semi-skilled, skilled, and highly skilled professionals around the world. Today, we're celebrating the official launch of Bangladeshi Professional Diaspora, which will talk about and focus on the skills and knowledge of the professionals around the world. The official launch of Global Diaspora opens a huge opportunity for us. And today, we can't really focus on so many areas, so we'll focus only on the knowledge transfer. How can we do the knowledge transfer from this esteemed panel that we have and the esteemed professional across the world so that we can tap into that huge opportunity of knowledge and stop that brain drain happening from Bangladesh. Without further delay, I would like to introduce the esteemed panel that we have with us. So we have Mr. Abrar Anwar, CEO of Standard Chartered Bank Malaysia. Previously, he was Standard Chartered Bank Malaysia's Bangladesh's CEO as well. Then we have Mr. Amer Farid, Director of Sopra Steria. I hope I'm pronouncing it well. It's an European leader in consulting and digital device and software development. Previously, he was also ex-director of strategic engagement and international innovation for UNICEF. We also have Mr. Azad with us. Azadul is the CEO of Max Group and founding chairman of B2B US. And at last but not least, we have Mr. Bidit, who's head of executive, alumni relation, and stakeholder engagement from Brunel Business School here in London. So as you can see, we've connected quite a few geographies around the world, and it's we would like to express our gratitude for your kind time for being with us. And I know it's the holiday season. It requires a lot of sacrifice from your time. Thanks for connecting again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as we mentioned, the Knowledge Hub, I would like to set the scene first before we go into the discussion. When we talk about Bangladeshi diaspora, the prominent figure that comes into our mind is that number, which is basically 6.6% of the GDP, which is contributed by the Bangladeshis and the remittance, around the world, which makes us the 8th largest remittance earner in the whole world. But as Bangladesh is migrating into a middle-income country by 2025, it's also important that we focus and tap into that social remittance part. By social remittance, we mean the product of knowledge and the socio-cognitive networks that we have, and tap into that opportunities. And I think we often talk about brain drain. So we talk about our people leaving different parts of the for the different parts of the world for job or for higher education. But this knowledge transfer can do an U-turn from brain drain to a brain gain. And we've seen our neighboring countries like China and India tapping into that hugely and transferring that, that knowledge, that experience, and leveraging that to transform and continue the transformation of their countries as well. So this shapes me to the first question to the forum. We'll go around the table. So if we ask the first question, this is about, are we leveraging the Diaspora Forum properly in the social remittance sector? If not, what can we do?
Thank you very much. If you want me to take that, I can take that. First off, thank you very much. I think it's a very, very important topic to discuss, and I must thank Brand Forum for organizing this Branding Bangladesh dialogue, our nation branding dialogue, so which is very critical. So I'm now sitting in, say, Malaysia, looking after Standard Chartered for the last 4 years. So it has given me an opportunity to really dive into the diaspora out there. Give or take, it will be around 1 million, more than 1 million people there. But of course, apparently, it looks like it's all semi-skilled or less skilled people. But really, to tell you frankly, being there and in close proximity, seeing them, I'm really, really proud of what our people are doing there. And then, because I, being a banker, we interact with a lot of manufacturing companies out there. And they are all so impressed, or they told me that they are so proud of their Bangladeshi workers out there. And because they're so hardworking, they don't create trouble, they're sincere, and they're hungry to deliver. So which really makes me proud. And also I've seen that there are a lot of professionals out there in being doctors or professors or even in the IT sector, emerging IT sector, quite a few. However, that's few in numbers. But definitely whoever are there are doing a great job. So I truly believe that there is a knowledge base out there, and more can come and contribute and gain knowledge out here. Why I'm saying that, if you look at Malaysia's GDP profile or export basket, it's one of the largest trading nations in the world with $450 billion of trade, 250 billion of export and 200 billion of imports. Out of that, 100 billion is actually E&E, or electrical or electronics, semiconductors and the microchips, and a lot of this equipment that goes into the high-tech manufacturing, in the raw material to conversion and the finished goods. So there's a whole ecosystem of activities that are happening in medical equipment, in computers. But if you dial back, in 80s, it used to be manufacturer of fridges, deep freezers, or television, air conditioners. But progressively, it has moved up the value chain. And we see that a lot of our Bangladeshi workers are also working there. A lot of engineers are there in the software. Also, there are a lot of Bangladeshis there. So it's not all that we have the workers there only, but there are some segments, professionals out there, like me. I interact with many of them. But how are we leveraging the diaspora? That's the topic of the day. I think we can do more, and there was some discussion that we were having. How do we connect with the government of Bangladesh and create their bridge of seeing who are there, what are they doing, what are they seeing, and how it can be transported to Bangladesh. For example, I would say that the people of our country are trainable, are very hardworking and sincere. So there is no reason why we cannot get into those areas of forward-looking opportunities that is coming up in ASEAN as a manufacturing for the OECD market, as a manufacturing hub for the OECD market. Every day we see new investments going there. When I talk to some of large clients over here who are the big players in Malaysia, they think of Indonesia, they think of Vietnam, or they think of maybe other countries to tap into the manufacturing opportunities. Sometimes I ask them, why not Bangladesh? So many of them, it is very apparent that they don't know much about Bangladesh, or we have not been able to possibly we have some more work to be done on national branding. However, I can tell you, the workers out there, they are actually branding Bangladesh. At least, I mean, from my close proximity, any manufacturing company that I've spoken, they actually employ 70-80% of our brothers out there, and they're so happy. So I will just conclude, and from my perspective right now here is that how do we create that connectivity with the investors out there, and also how the diaspora can share some thoughts or the experience of being here, and that can share and then have a collective agenda. Which are the areas that people will need to develop skill? For example, we see that coding, artificial intelligence, tooling skill of supporting the electronics, the business of the future is very much required. So how Bangladesh can project the skill set requirement for the future, how the diaspora can help and share the knowledge of what we see here, and then we can take it from there. I would say that it would be a baby step, but it would be worth considering. Really get the knowledge of the people who are day in, day out working and seeing nuances and what are the investors talking about, what are the type of people they're looking for. So I'll pause here. Maybe I'll respond as we hear from other esteemed panelists as well. Thank you.
Hi, I can add to this. So I think what Mr. Anwar is saying is very, very important from the skill set. So just to build on what you said, much has been said about, obviously we are graduating now from the LDC. We are on this amazing journey right now. We see our remittance, the power of our remittance, and it's from the hard work of people overseas. But how do we, let's think about the next phase. How do we build on this? Right? Our workers are coming into a certain segment, and then you have the diaspora who in different ways have graduated, sitting in different places. This panel is a perfect example of the type of people. And what is the red thread and the environment that we can bring to help these diaspora come back and bring that knowledge, right? That's the question that we are asking ourselves. And I think one of the critical things here is, if we look at how the manufacturing that you were referring to, Mr. Anwar, even in our ready-made industry today, right? Foreign direct investors came, they brought the skill set, our people trained, and today our people are known as one of the best disciplined, et cetera, right? So if we think about Bangladesh's journey as a middle-income country and where we're going, we know that, many players have to be involved. There's the role of government, there's the private sector, and then there's a whole social sector that I'd like to add on, Jahid, as well, which is very important. But there, we also need to think of academia's role, but how do we position our people? Because what are we talking about at the end, right? It's people that we have. Our people are our biggest resources, externally and internally. So in order to bring these people together, how can we upskill them and make them more valuable for, let's talk about the 21st century skill sets, right? Today, the fourth industrial revolution that you're hearing about in Europe and you're hearing everywhere, Mr. Anwar is saying, electronic engineering, some of those components, so I think we have to look in Bangladesh as our people skills, the coding and the pure academia side, which is more long-term systemic change. And there are people on this forum who have much better ideas than me on that side. But also then I think creating an environment where then the diaspora also is coming back, right? Let's talk about the technology environment. That's in a way one of the least barriers of cross-border to bring people in, right? And we have people from all spectrums, from engineers to entrepreneurs to salespeople to product developers. That whole spectrum is there. And I think if we create, I think we have to kind of view Bangladesh as this global lab. It's a really interesting place, right? Large population, growing sector. It has all the market dynamics to test products as well, right? Large retail, domestic market, international export capabilities as well. And I think if we look at some of the things that have been happening from a social perspective, right? Bangladesh has also seen another sector that has been huge, our development sector, right? Our development sector, the NGOs, the local ones, we have exported our own knowledge internationally. And I think if we look at the impact of climate, for example, on Bangladesh, it's going to be massive. There's no ignoring it, right? We're going to have issues with water, energy, people, food, you name it. We know this. But we've built a lot of great local resilience? How can we create more sort of innovative environment where our engineers and smart entrepreneurs are doing these startups over there? How can we create that environment for them to bring it locally and test and do things? There's a lot of local capital available for this. It's about creating the environment, right? We talk about foreign direct investment a lot. And of course, it's great that foreign tech ventures are coming into Bangladesh, but there is so much capital locally that if created in the right environment would deploy. I mean, we have a massive market. You know, if you produce a product that is going to work and is environmentally helping and making your life better, you can sell tens of millions of that product locally, right? So my point is, I'll stop here, but I think it's about creating that environment where we also enable our diaspora and foreign investors to come in and also allow domestic companies to be able to export out. And what I mean by that is some of the governance issues. Like, we should enable our local powerhouse companies and entrepreneurs to be able to invest and take stakes in other companies internationally, because by then you're then able to also influence what you could manufacture in Bangladesh, the type of skill sets you could bring in. So it's bringing the two together. But I'll stop with that. But this is a very interesting topic, and I hope added some value there.
Can I add one question? I think we're talking about diaspora, but we're also at the same time we're talking about people like in Malaysia who are working. We call them NRBs, or people who are carrying the Bangladeshi passport for that perspective. But I've been involved with this kind of thing since a long time ago, 1998, when Anir and we started Tech Bangla and things like that. So we try to separate these things. One is people who actually went abroad to really do the work. They're carrying the Bangladeshi passport. And some of the people like us who are actually living in a different country with their citizenship or different immigration statuses, not carrying the Bangladeshi passport. I call them diaspora because they have a different way of engaging with Bangladesh. And the other people who went there to work, migrant workers, they have a different engagement with Bangladesh. So I want to keep them separate. They're two different types. You talked about a lot of very, very important things, but I'm putting them in buckets because I have a very simplistic mind. So I'm keeping things in different buckets, but I'm more about a structure. We can talk about all those things of what needs to happen, but there are things that are already in place, or at least going into the place. If we try to reinvent those, we're going to be spending a lot of time, and then we'll find out actually where it happens, the compliance and the government and the regulation and the ministry when we act. And then, so just to give you a little bit hint, and I'll come back to that later on, there's an NRB task force that we formed, and we worked on it with the Prime Minister's office and ERD and other agencies. It's actually literally a government kind of you can call, at this time it's a task force, but eventually this is going to be spun off to a bigger, age. So this one, within the NRB task force, we worked on a concept called PIE, P-I-E. P is for philanthropy. Anybody wants to invest, could donate money to Bangladesh, there would be a philanthropy. And I is for investment, and E is for expert affiliation. So if you keep these three buckets, like P, I, and E, you will see a lot of the things that we're talking about will fall into these buckets. Like expert, if you talk about investment, a lot of time I keep hearing investment, like BIDA and BEJA and others, high-tech authority, they're talking about investment. But in our perspective and everything that I'm hearing from all the panelists, distinguished panelists, investment doesn't have to be only money. It could be financial, intellectual, cultural, emotional, social investment. So not every diaspora that you see are interested to engage in Bangladesh. Let's get it right. There is only a very small percentage of diaspora who would be thinking about engaging with Bangladesh, getting into the development process in Bangladesh, people like us or some of the people. But majority of them may not be interested. They have already left and they just want to enjoy. They may not even be interested to hear what we have to say. So we need to have that reality in mind. It's a very small percentage, maybe 5-10% of people who are really interested to give something back to Bangladesh. It's nice to hear, but they don't really get engaged. Within the intellectual investment, then we have this knowledge transfer, we can have this expert affiliation and all those. So what we found out, that we need to make it very easy for them to get engaged. Either they can donate their knowledge in return of a remuneration or recognition, but most of the time is recognition, as not so much of the money. But they want to come to Bangladesh, they want to be recognized for their whatever contribution they have done. If they're properly recognized, and this recognition doesn't mean getting awards, getting, things like that. It's the actual SME in Bangladesh, their counterpart, to listen to them, to listen to their advice, and then accept them as experts. If people come from Bangladesh, from abroad, and they come up with, for example, you pick up anything that, we talk about 4IR, we talk about nanotechnology or robotics or any of the newer technology. If somebody comes in, and when he is offering his service to Bangladesh, the counterpart in Bangladesh, if they say, we know it all, whatever that you're saying, we have already done that, who are you to tell me? Because we have experts, we have graduates from here, graduates from the government officers who knows everything. So we don't need experts like you. Think about people like Mr. Saifur. He's from Government Laboratory High School, and he is the president of IEEE. You're talking about IEEE chairman and a president, elected president, and he is here in Bangladesh right now. So a person like him, when he talks about things that are going to happen, we need to listen, because the rest of the world is listening to him. So if the people, electrical engineers and others in Bangladesh, if they said, we don't need you, we know, everything, then he's not going to be recognized. That's what I'm talking about. He's not looking for some awards and things like that. Second is, there is a large number of diaspora who would be interested to come in Bangladesh and have a gainful employment and contribute. People like me. I've been in America for the last 40, 45 years or so, and I was working in third largest energy company in America, in Kinder Morgan. But I left that 3 years ago. Now I'm actually working in Bangladesh. At this time, I'm sitting in Ishurdin, Pavna, for the Rupur nuclear power plant. So, if you see it from that perspective, whatever that I have learned, I have an opportunity, thanks to Max Group, that I can actually contribute in a different manner. It doesn't have to be that I'm donating something, but I'm actually working in Bangladesh. The other intellectual people, that physicians that we have, a large group of physicians, they're very busy people, but they can get engaged in a lot of things. We need to give them the proper room to grow. Then we can talk about cultural, we can talk about emotional, social. These are all investment by the diaspora for Bangladesh. So what we really have to do is to have a structure where they can easily contribute. That doesn't mean they have to come to Bangladesh, they have to spend time, they have to live there, they have to do that. They can do wherever they are living in the world, they can easily get engaged, contribute, and then get recognized or get some kind of a return. The last part of it is the expert affiliation. Expert affiliation is what we're talking now. Is to, again, going back to the same thing, is a diaspora database and connecting people and things like that. That is expert affiliation. We talked about other, top 10 and some of the things that worked for a while, didn't work for a while. Now things are different. Now we can be digitally connected. We have all these kinds of outsourcing and, mechanism to work from remotely from anywhere. So if we can establish this structure and take that structure to the government, which they have already done, make it such that if somebody get engaged, if somebody actually works in Bangladesh, they're not going to suffer a lot of what they call is the, some kind of a hassle. That you come to Bangladesh, you try to do something, and then you get into issues that you, for example, you cannot take your money, there's a repatriation issue, you cannot invest money. Remittance is not investment like FDI. If somebody sends money through remittance, you cannot take that money out. A lot of people don't understand that. FDI is not for people like us. I'm not going to invest $150 million in Bangladesh. And I don't understand that kind of a FDI mechanism, but I might invest $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 in Bangladesh and get my money out. Like I invested in a bank, things like that. So if we can make it easier for people, and if we make it palatable, so that's easier to sell, and that structure needs to be supported by the government and the private sector, then people like us, people like you can take that message everywhere. That, hey, you come, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already structure is in place and it is government sanctioned. You do it, and then we can make it easier. Then I think what Mr. Jahid had mentioned, that at the end of the discussion, at the end of what Sharif Bhai and from B2B and Brand Bangladesh are trying to do, We want to actually have a tangible, sustainable impact. We have done enough talk. We need to make it such so that actually at the end of the day, we can say, yes, we have brought in, 1,000 people, 2,000 people, or even 10 people, that they are actually engaging in project, which actually we have already done so, that we can impact like in 4IR or any of the newer things that were happening. That is where we can make a difference. So going back to the structure, everything that we are going to talk about, if I can put them in different buckets, you will talk about skill development, we can talk about investment, we can talk about all of those, but keep that in mind that there has, in the way that government works, I mean, not necessarily we can bring in technology. There are a lot of sensitive technology. So you need to be mindful about that. That is that compliant? Is that technology that we're exporting from the country, is that actually a valid export or technology transfer rules? There are a lot of things you cannot just simply transfer. Then you get into a serious issue. Actually, we can even put the government at risk. If somebody brings in a technology, sensitive technology, gives it to Bangladesh, we can put the government at risk. So there has to be some regulation to make sure that we don't put the government at a risk or the company who's investing at a risk. Somebody can steal some technology, bring it to Bangladesh and give it to some company. It will be a big news. So maybe we need to be careful that nobody can take advantage of it for personal gain. I mean, you know very well what I'm talking about in this particular context. There are, cyber security, there are a lot of sensitive technology that people can personally bring it, start working in Bangladesh for personal gain and make a negative impact for the whole country. That's why the government entity is supposed to be there to make sure whatever that we are doing is compliant. It is within the context of the government as far as the regulation goes, and then everything is up to us. Intellectually, what we bring is not a problem, but it needs to be in a structured manner. And that's where we come in from B2B that I mentioned. We coach people. Whenever people say, I'm a diaspora, I'm an expert, or I want to invest money, we coach them that this is how you do it. Don't come to Bangladesh and expect to open your companies in 7 days. That's the wrong thing. Don't come to Bangladesh just because you have a PhD and you think the Bangladeshi universities will embrace you for your technology. That's not how. So how do you do it? That's where we come in, we coach people. So I really appreciate the discussion. I think it's really good to see the same kind of, same wavelength that I'm hearing from all of us. So I'll stop here. And if you have any questions about what is happening in the Bangladesh in the context of what we talked about, I'm available later on also. And, I think we're all connected through Brand Bangladesh. We are also going to engage some more events going forward and some in Europe probably in October. And we'll talk more. Thank you so much.
Fantastic, Mr. Hawk. And sorry, am I allowed to go ahead with my own 2 pence? Thank you very much, Brand Bangladesh, for having me here today. Because of my own employment, by my own orientation with academia, I will take the perspective from the academic institutes and academic and higher education sector in general. As you know that universities are fundamentally required to create and disseminate knowledge. So the creation and dissemination of knowledge is the fundamental purpose of a university. And when I look at Bangladeshi universities over the years, despite having some well-reputed and some of the university's history and strength go long back and deep into strong intellectual activities, we haven't been able to, I'm talking about the Bangladeshi universities or higher education sector in general, haven't been able to hit the top rank, forget about in the global standard, not even Asia or South Asian standard. So that's a huge disappointment if we look at, and when we are talking about that, the diasporas are able to contribute. I think that's an area where we, the non-resident Bangladeshi academics all around the world, are very keen to contribute, are very keen to help the universities, our own alma maters who desperately need our expertise. But frustratingly, from my conversation with fellow Bangladeshi academics and from my own experience, I can see that the appetite from Bangladeshi higher education institutes is not as much as we should have expected. Rather, there is a colonized mindset that someone with Anglo-Saxon names and white skin would be appreciated more in Bangladeshi universities rather than we Bangladeshis who have been equally successful and gained a reputation in our own respective sectors and areas. And that is a major problem what we see. Often we Bangladeshis are not equally recognized, as Mr. Hawke mentioned about the recognition, and that's something has been a key disappointing feature, particularly in the higher education sector. Now, the other thing which Mr. Hawke has mentioned, and I think that's a very crucial aspect of this conversation, that what is the motivation for diasporas? Why do diasporas go? I mean, what is their underlying reasons and their impetus to get involved or to make any sort of positive contribution to Bangladesh? Okay, we are first generation migrants, many of us are, we still have got family members, we still have got our emotional attachment, but what happens moving to the next generation who have got barely any kind of attachment, tangible or intangible, with Bangladesh? So it will eventually evaporate. So we cannot think about sustained interaction and a symbiotic relationship with non-resident Bangladeshis if we do not see the reasons or the motivating factors that would drive them to engage with any potential activities based in Bangladesh. So that's something, again, has to be looked at. Now, coming to my own area of academia, I'll just add one more point and then we'll go back to the discussion again, is there are a lot of potentials, and that's what we see. And as Mr. Hawke said, that the initiative has to come from the government side, and governments in India and China, they incentivize their universities to have collaboration. And often this collaboration is actively encouraged to non-resident Indians and Chinese. But we do not have as such measures either from government or even private sector higher education institutes in Bangladesh, right? We publish in leading management, business journals. I'm talking about business management, that's my area, but I also know colleagues and friends who have enormous potential and enormous reputation in the likes of science and technology and social science. And these people could be collaboratively support scholars in Bangladesh and co-create those ideas. That, as Mr. Hawke and before Mr. Farid mentioned about the success of NGO sector in Bangladesh, which is one of the key achievements that we have got in the last 50 years. The difference that Bangladesh has got compared to Pakistan is our enormous contribution by NGO sector. That's why our child mortality is low, our population has been controlled, our social indicators, including women empowerment, has a huge surge. And that's what we could become a role model for the rest of the world. And where that knowledge will come from? That knowledge will come from very much within Bangladesh. And the non-resident Bangladeshi scholars can collaborate with local Bangladeshi scholars, and thereby we can highlight these enormous success stories that we have had over the years and can create huge story out of it. And that's what we can think about moving forward. So I stop here now and we will get back to the discussion. Thanks, Jahid.
I want to add one thing. Is one of the most important thing about universities and academia. Rest of the world, most of the research are being done at the universities. They're either being given from the government grants to do a certain key area, or it is actually been funded by the private organization. But in Bangladesh, research is purely academic or theoretical only, just to get the degree. If you ask a PhD student to take his PhD and go to the market to sell it, he will not be able to sell his own ideas because it has no meaning in the real world. It's mostly theoretical, mostly, presentation-wise. So there is a fundamental difference when we talk about academia, actually education and applied education. And that mindset, if we change, I think then academia will be tremendously benefited. Now you don't really have to wait till you graduate. You can take a first year student, second year student, and start giving them enough ammunition, or ammunition has a negative connotation, but enough knowledge for them to sustain in the real world and make an impact. So I'm going back to the same structure again, because when you say B2B, B2B is bridge to Bangladesh. Our job is to really to explain to the diaspora how to engage in Bangladesh. And the same way is to build a bridge between this gap. And this is going on, this dialogue is going on for a long time. We see a lot of groups, they're trying to do on their own. In 2019, I was happy to be the convener of the Convention of NRB Engineers, CONE. We brought in 300 engineers. It was sponsored. The idea was coined by the chairman of Max Group, and eventually he sponsored the event. We brought in 300 engineers from all across the country, all across the world, engineers to think about Bangladesh. They presented their papers. They're all sorted out, and we presented those projects to the government. Some of them were adopted, but then again, there has to be a bridge between the government and the private sector and the academia. So I think what you mentioned is the impact of academia is huge, because that is the actual where things happen. That's where the lab, that's where new ideas will come. We talk about 4IR, the technology. Who do you think is going to teach about nanotechnology and nano robots? Or you talk about, quantum computing. We talk about 3D printing. We talk about, any of who's going to teach that? That has to start from the universities. And then eventually it will flow to the market. So your impact, what you said, I totally agree with it. And that's where the expert affiliation comes in. We also proposed, and this is one of the things should be from the NRB task force, is to recognize these people officially. There has to be some way. So when they're actually coming to Bangladesh, maybe for a short time, maybe for a longer time, how do we give them some benefit? Like you mentioned, what's in it for me? Why would they come? I mean, sometimes people, they might come for money, they might come from recognition, but what we found from our experience, most of them have a kind of a soft corner for Bangladesh. Their feeling is, if I can go home, meet my family and friends, and on the side, if I can contribute during my sabbatical, during my summertime, during some time, I would be happy. I don't need any money. So we need to tap into that soft corner and then engage them digitally for the rest of the other 365 days. Then we can have some tangible impact.
Can I just add one more point? I quite like the word that you have used as hub, right? And I always am of the opinion that Bangladesh can be a nice, not only hub, lab, right? So Bangladesh can be an ideal, the perfect lab for social science-based experiments and research, right? That how society has transformed over the years, and our history, heritage, the resilience of the nation. If you look at that, I mean, one aspect which perhaps has driven us a long way is the resilience of the country or the nation, both at the individual and collective levels. So those areas could be researched, and that's what perhaps would be more of interest for non-resident Bangladeshi scholars, that they find Bangladesh as an area where they can engage into intellectual deliberation, can do primary research, and also can create that knowledge which can be disseminated.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
So,
I mean, think about from an academic perspective, how many books are being written about Bangladesh? The case Bangladesh is a fantastic example of so many things that are happening within Bangladesh. I'm surprised to see that a lot of the people, even in my own circle, they don't know what is happening in Bangladesh. So when you're talking about diaspora, when you talk about academia, if we start writing books in Bangladesh and publish in different rest of the world, then people will read, and that's actually the nation branding that we can do. Through intellectually, we can do the branding rather than having events and things like that. So
Absolutely. I think very, very exciting and passionate discussion. I'm just looking at the watch. I mean, it's been almost 40 minutes of passionate discussion, and there's a common thread or a common theme that's arising from this. I think the first one is we're very clear around, what knowledge do we need? I think it was coming out from both the private, the development sector around the world, that, we need to focus on that fourth industrial revolution that we're going through, focusing on coding, AI. I think that point is very, very clear in terms of how we can focus in that knowledge area. The next thing, I think, it's sort of coming out from everyone, and I'm just looking at the notes, and I think one thing that clearly comes out is that the need for that structure of, the structured framework through which the knowledge will be disseminated. And the next pivotal question is, how can we sustain this? To your example, Azad Bhai, about that 300 engineers even, that was a great opportunity to tap into 300 bright minds. How can we sustain that? Not as a one-off event, which dies out, but, how can we sort of really focus and sustain that? So the next topic for our discussion for the remaining 15 minutes is we're going to focusing on what should be our starting point. And Azad Bhai, and I'll look out to you because you've got more experience in this as you've been working around the B2B. So what should be the starting point for putting a structure? The reason I'm asking this question is we now have 4 chapters around the world in the form of BD Diaspora. So we have UK chapter, we have Australia chapter, we have Canada and US chapter. So that talks about the huge hubs where our skills were transferred from Bangladesh to different parts of the world. It's time to leverage their collective experience. So my first question is, how can we start that structure framework that we talked about? My second question is about that tripartite. I think Bidit and Azad Bhai, you guys are very clear about having that industry, government and academia partnership, that tripartite. How can we have that? Because we've been discussing about this. Everyone's passionate. It's been 50 years for our country. How can we now walk the talk and ensure that we can make it a tangible, product or delivery so that the government is very interested in us? The NRBs or diasporas, however you call them, are really motivated, engaged, and recognized to sort of, contribute continuously. So that's basically my question.
Okay, I will take that. Actually, it's not a start. It already started, because when you do a structure, because at the end of the day, the receiving end is Bangladesh. Doesn't matter how big of a project that I bring in, whatever technology that I bring in, it must be translated in the context of Bangladesh. Otherwise, this will fail. This will not sustain. And to answer your question that, we brought in 300 engineers, what happened to it? After that, we continued on. I'm the first one to come to Bangladesh, and then we have probably about 5 or 6 of them came in, and some of them engaged in different ways. We have projects going on out of those 3. And businesses also took place because of our engagement with them. Because as B2B, we are not interested in getting into business. We just want to point people, do this and that, and they do it on their own. So coming back to the structure, we had many, many meetings with the Prime Minister's office and ERD and all the other agencies who are interested. And they gave their feedback that how can Bangladesh really have an NRB-centric task force? Without that structure, nothing can happen. And it's not easy to have some kind of a policy to come out. So we were fortunate to have a mentor, our SDG coordinator, principal coordinator, Abul Kalam Azad, is a dynamic person. And we also had ERD Secretary, Mr. Anwar. Those people were really helpful to mentoring this structure. And there are a lot of workshops done already. That what are the areas government really needs help? Let's say, for example, I might bring in, because of diaspora, because I know I bring in, something like space science or something like agriculture or something that Bangladesh doesn't need. And then I bring it into Bangladesh. Then Bangladesh said, I don't have any need for that. Then I become frustrated. Then I go to the media and I say, oh yeah, I know I came here, Bangladesh doesn't care about me. So I badmouth about Bangladesh. That's what happens a lot. So what we need to find out is what is the supply and demand? What is the demand first in Bangladesh? So we somewhat identified the areas that Bangladesh government really needs some help. And then what is the supply side? Do I have those people anywhere, like through your network, through my network? I have executive directors of B2B in different countries and people in this forum. Do we have people who can be really the SME to contribute? If I can find this supply and demand, I do the marriage, and then they come and do it. So that's where the structure comes in. What didn't happen, and that we are trying to do with working with Brand Bangladesh, is to take this online. So people can actually do the matchmaking. They can do these are the areas the Bangladesh is looking for, so I'm interested. I'm an expert in this area. And we have done that in certain areas. For example, a good example is the cybersecurity, policies. I mean, we brought in experts in cybersecurity that are Bangladeshi origin, or you can call diaspora. We didn't want to go to somebody in a different, country. So, and then eventually, I think the cybersecurity policies are taking shape. And then for IR in different areas in technology, we are plugging in people who are really expert in those areas. So we can plug in those things. I come from the power sector, so I have maybe some impact in designing. So that's how we can bring in the supply and demand side. So from a structure point of view, it already started. What Sharif Bhai and I are discussing is to really impact the work through innovation. As you know, innovation is the key word to drive all of the 4IR activities. So there is going to be an innovation-centric discussion very soon from Bangladesh Brands Forum and also B2B jointly. And then we are going to take it to our first event, probably in October, where in Europe, that we do what we call Frontier Technology and Business Conclave, meaning what are the technologies that Bangladesh needs to focus on for next 50 years? And then we identify those technology areas, very high-tech, technology don't even exist now. What are the frontier technologies? Then we look for the expert in those areas within our diaspora. Maybe those are the budding, research people doing PhDs. Then we can shape up that, okay, people who are going to be doing research, these are the areas Bangladesh will be needing 30 years from now. It may not be now. So you see, what we are thinking about now is not for today. What we are thinking is 100-year anniversary of Bangladesh. Are we going to talk about the same thing? We want to build something now. So 50 years from now, I won't be here. Maybe some of you will be. But someone will say, hey, 50 years ago, somebody thought about it. They planted the seed. Now we are getting the fruit. So that's our concept. What you mentioned, the things already started happening. We will build a structure, which is an organic structure. It will continuously change. So people can contribute very easily, get their benefit very easily. And that's where we come in, is as far as the structure is concerned. It doesn't have to be a rigid structure. It's a fluid, it's an organic structure. Okay.
I think
Very clear.
What
I think
Mr. Hawk is saying, I can sorry, Jahid, to talk over you.
Yeah.
So because it resonates to me is a scheme that Indian government has been running over the last 3-4 years. They call it Spark Project, SPARC. As part of that, so there is a pot of government funding, and where the universities actually, it's coordinated by the IITs, right? But it's open for any other institutes, and they have to make a collaboration with an overseas university in Europe, US, or UK, Australia. They of course have got certain category that universities have to meet certain standard. Right. And that's where the adjudication or the assessment panel comprises of industry experts and academic experts, right? So they together look at various project proposals, and then they screen out, and 10 to 15 projects are accepted with a very hefty amount of research budget. So that's very much can be a way forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I also can think about where academia can come into play is, these government scholarships that are offered, right? There is scholarships from PMO's office, there is Commonwealth scholarships, which is of course channeled through Ministry of Education. So these scholarships should create a condition or have a condition that the PhD has to be done on Bangladeshi context, right? So there are so many scholars, Bangladeshi scholars, who are doing PhDs all around the world, but that is not benefiting us much because the context of their research is often not Bangladesh. I'm proud to say that my research context was very much in Bangladesh, and I have had the privilege to share the stories of Bangladeshi farmers in various international conferences, right? So that's where I see that, again, another potential areas where government can make some significant policy formulation. Finally, about the concept of ecosystem that you said, and that's I would say the brocolage, the word that means that there has to be supportive collaboration amongst various stakeholder groups, right? And they actually complement each other. So if we look at tourism, that has got spillover effect on trade and business. If we look at education, that has got spillover effect on knowledge transfer and capacity building. So, but I'm sure, Mr. Hawking, from your knowledge, you know that there must be some strategic perspective, but we have to be much more actively pursuing to get those goals and those have to be translated more into tangible, visible expression so that people both inside and outside Bangladesh can know that what are expected from their ends. And then that will be much more effective, I believe. Thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah. Very interesting insights, especially the research that you guys have already carried out, specifically around the areas of demand in terms of where Bangladesh should be focused and the frontier technology. I think this is a very exciting event next year. We'll be looking forward to that. How can we make this information available to our diaspora? Because this program will be watched by millions of diasporas around the world. So it's basically a pledge to the BD diaspora around the world. If you can highlight some of the areas where we can focus for the knowledge to be transferred. And it's like an open invitation that this is the area that Bangladesh is looking at in the next 50 years, or if we can break it down to next 4 to 5 years. And how can diaspora contribute? And then we can work on that collaboration or partnership that we talked about from each chapter to at least tap into those experts around the world and bring them and sustain that through the ecosystem that you talked about.
Well, actually, oh, please go ahead.
Sorry, I'm happy to go first on this occasion
please.
Because recently I've been researching on South Asian communities' identity in the UK context, and I would like to refer to a statement by British Bangladeshi baker Nadia. Perhaps you guys have heard about her. So she said that I'm at the same time British, Bangladeshi, and Muslim, and I do not think that they are contradictory to each other. So these multiple identities are quintessentially part of diaspora communities, right? And one of those identities, of course, is Bangladeshi identity. The other could be religious, and of course, there is national citizenship identity. So the way to reach them out is to reach out to the particular community organizations where they feel that their identities are attached to it, right? So we'll be making a huge maybe it may not be an appropriate judicious way to consider that the social media is the way to reach them out. Of course, that will tap into some of the first generation, but that will never reach out to the second generation or the ones who have been out of the country for a long time. So we need to engage with various community organizations, business community organizations, because as you know, 500,000 Sileti population based in London and the UK, who constitute a huge part of our overseas population, and they are equally keen, but they perhaps are not well connected with our Dhaka-based communities, right? So we need to see these different ways people actually identify themselves and how they actually interact on various platforms. So we have to actually look at different platforms and tap into those different groups. Thank you.
Okay. In short, I just want to add, I think you mentioned about how to engage. If you go to the website that we created for the NRB task force, it's a government website, nrb.gov.bd. All of the things that we just mentioned are already there. So you'll see there's a structure where the people can submit their project. They can submit, different ideas. There's a forum. All of these are in the process of being developed, and we are kind of partnering with them, you can say, behind the scene. government is not going to come up and update all those contents unless we contribute. So that's where we come in from behind the scene to actually do this. This is a you can say the central structure, and then we have Bangladesh Brand Forum and B2B. So if people are interested to get in touch, this is not going to be a huge hundreds of thousands of people. I tell you, it could be just a dozens of people who are passionate, crazy people like us, who are really want to do something in Bangladesh. It's not easy, but the reward is thousandfold. I mean, it's a tremendous excitement when you see that some of the ideas that you have are really happening in Bangladesh, that you're actually making an impact. The idea that you have given, now that has actually been implemented in Bangladesh, especially is beyond the 4IR things. There are areas like water, the areas like agriculture, areas in environmental areas. A lot of people are doing research now. You can take those projects in Bangladesh and have an impact. But to be able to do that, you need to understand what Bangladesh is really looking for. So that way, like you mentioned, the subject matter that you're doing research, if they're in the context of Bangladesh, then it's much easier to do the bonding. If it is something completely business-centric that has nothing to do with Bangladesh or contrary to the social beliefs in Bangladesh, then it's not going to work. So anybody who's interested from our side, our recommendation would be to know more about Bangladesh, to do a bit of research, reach out to us or any one of us. We can actually guide them. What are the areas of focus that they need to do? And that's our job. Okay.
Absolutely. The global platform or the chapters that we have, I think, work as a bridge to the B2B and the government as well to disseminate that information, because it's not always possible for those passionate individuals that you defined, out there in different parts of the world to always tap into that information. We don't have that access to that information always, even if it's publicly available or available in public domains. But I think, the more we talk about it, the more we have that bridge and connection amongst the professionals around the world. If 4 or 5 projects or ideas flourish, I think that's a start. That's a humble beginning that we can make through each of the chapters. And I think, the pledge would be all the 4 chapters can work collaboratively with you and the B2B and the Prime Minister Office to ensure that we focus on the right area where Bangladesh can benefit the most. And also, I think both of you have...
This is not a 100-meter sprint. This is a marathon. This is a 50-year marathon. So don't expect a result in the first round. It's going to take some time to see the fruitful results, maybe 10 years down the road. It's a long journey. It's a long journey.
Yeah. And what would be the motivational factor? Because I think that sort of would be the last topic for our discussion today, so that we can keep our diaspora engaged and motivated. You talked about that recognition. You talked about, the passion that automatically. So there should be a push and pull. So from both elements of to ensure that our people are engaged. How can we, continue to sustain this? Bidit?
Yes, just from an anecdotal way, and then I'll go into more research-driven findings. So if I look at my son, I can see that his motivation for being a Bangladeshi relates to cricket. Right. And gradually and through that way, he has started exploring, he has started looking at different places. So he knows fairly good about Bangladesh right now. Right. Okay. So the point is that the cricket is quite an interesting way to define our identity. That's something where we are present in the global arena, where we have a place, right? And that creates a tangible way to define the national pride and identity for our populace, right? And I think more of these sort of prestigious and more globally recognized issues to be brought into the forefront. And that's what I say, that talking about Nadia being proud of her Bangladeshi origin, right? So, and that has to be coupled with all other factors that make Bangladeshis proud and known and popular and familiar right? So, and it has to be, again, as Mr. Hook said, it is a marathon, it's not a sprint. But the ways we can, if we can create a nation brand, the brand that identifies a nation who have been battered by cyclones and floods, but still managed to get the fastest GDP growth in the region, who has surpassed the likes of India and China, the nation which was deemed as a basket case and within 50 years has become one of the potential economic powerhouse in South Asia. So these narratives have to be communicated globally, and more these narratives will be. And look at the Indian diaspora, right, which is split. There is Sikhs have got their own identity. Different parts of Indian population have got different identity, but in the last 20, 30 years, they have started to realize and believe in themselves, and that Indian diaspora is doing a world of good to India as a country, right? We have to do the same way. We really have to create that positive narrative about Bangladesh, communicate it with the rest of the world, and that will automatically motivate and engage, create that self-actualization and self-esteem amongst our diaspora members, and they will be interested to get back and get involved.
Couldn't agree more. That is absolutely correct. And you mentioned about motivation. Motivation could be financially. I know companies, I know diaspora people who are coming into Bangladesh, investing money and making tons of money, which is exactly what we want. And then people are thinking about Bangladesh as an investment option. But then again, the story of Bangladesh is not being told properly. The story of Bangladesh must be told in a way that connects with people in wherever the country that we are actually telling this story. Now, if we go from Bangladesh to tell this story, and we tell this story to Bangladeshi people in going around in different world, then it's not going to work, because they already know about those things, and that's not really our audience. Our audience should be in different country when we go. It's non-Bangladeshis. We need to tell them the story. We need to have people from different sectors, industrial sectors, or that relates to them, tell them the story. But if we go there and we gather a huge Bangladeshi community and then we tell about the story of Bangladesh, that's not really going to help. So again, I think there are a lot of work has to happen. I am kind of, you can call passionate about, one of the things is the cultural, and intellectual investment. And I think I mentioned that in a lot of forum, that think about our music. If you understand that in Bangladesh, here in the UK, and my son, they're brought up in USA. One of my son is a violinist, is a professional violinist, and he could not find Bangladeshi sheet music to play. The musical notes, the only thing was found is the national anthem. So if we could create the music of Bangladesh and create these, notes and musics and send it to everywhere in the rest of the world, that look, this is what Bangladesh is all about. Listen to our music, see the beautiful music that we have, how melodious they are. And then we make it available through social media, website, free, make it all. Send it to the teachers, the primary school teachers, the violin teachers, and all the academies, that why are you playing just the African music or other music? Listen to our music. And then tell a bit of a story behind each music, each song. And then that's a kind of a cultural way of getting into people's, students, young children, playing our song, playing the music of Bangladesh. Same way our stories, through cartoons, through TV programs, getting into the children's mind. Today, the children who's listening or who would be listening or watching these cartoons or listening to the music, 50 years from now, he could be the ambassador, US ambassador coming into Bangladesh. He will say, I heard this song when I was in kindergarten. I know about this Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, so don't tell me, I already know about your history. We want to have that kind of a plan, 50 years plan, so that you can reap the benefit 50 years from now. It will take some time. It will take some effort. We can infiltrate maybe it's the wrong way of saying infiltrate as a negative connotation, but culturally we need to embed our thoughts, our vision, our philosophy into the rest of the world. Then we are actually doing the nation branding. Nation branding is not just having one or two events. We need to invest time and effort in branding Bangladesh. So I think I have taken enough time, so I'll stop here. So,
it was a very insightful discussion, and thanks for your valued time, and thanks for connecting from all around the world. It really means a lot. And as we celebrate the official launch of Bangladeshi Diaspora, the window of opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, is huge. And the only way we can tap into is that constant communication and the network, through which we're going to have that 4th chapter connected with the government, connected with the academia, and ensure that we tap into the need of Bangladesh and address them in a more structured way. It was great to have you. Thank you very much again for your time. Any final call out or call to action to the diasporas around the world?
No, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Just we'll keep remain connected. Enjoy Bangla. Thank you.
Yes. Think Bangladesh. Okay.